you intend making on this matter, and I would encourage you to arrive at it at an early date. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator. I have 16 senators who have indicated to speak now. We have an hour and 15 minutes for the Minister's asked to reply, so we'll have to be very strict on time. So, next speaker is Senator van Turnhout. You have 8 minutes.
Thank you very much, and I'll try and be succinct. Minister, I will have 5 specific questions or asked, but I just would like to say a brief few words first on the issue. And I suppose I'm speaking here this morning as a senator, as a children's rights activist, but also as a proud Irish citizen. And my first concern that I have is about the social and cultural acceptability of our excessive alcohol usage. It disturbs me how frequently and casually excessive drinking and being hungover is spoken about on our national airwaves, in the media and in discourse following sport events and other everyday conversations. So, for example, how's the head, I'm dying, it's all the Irish flu, it's all, acceptable discourse for us. And we have this references that, that we bandy it about all the time. And I'm not trying to sound anyway pious, it's not that I haven't misused alcohol myself, but it's the way that we use it in our parlance as it is acceptable and tolerated. That is where and when I have a difficulty. Because we actually are sending a very mixed message in our discourse around drinking. On the one hand, we have drink awareness campaigns, particularly targeting young people, and I'm sure in this debate today we'll all talk about the scourge that there is of binge drinking for young people. And we'll highlight the dangers of excessive drinking. And on the other hand, we as adults, we laugh it off. And I think we're sending extremely mixed messages. Also, it strikes me that our international reputation as a nation of drinkers is seriously undesirable and becoming increasingly undesirable. And it's something that we should be working really hard to overcome. I was on holiday in the US over the summer, and I was very shocked to see a T-shirt being sold in a tour shop among a number of T-shirts of a similar vein, but one depicted Irish yoga, and it was a series of images of an extremely intoxicated man. Now, I have a pretty healthy sense of humour, but I didn't find it funny. In fact, I was extremely embarrassed to be looking that this is the depiction on several different types of T-shirt of Ireland. There was nothing positive about that message. There is an intrinsic link between excessive alcohol consumption and alcohol-related harm in Ireland. The negative impact, as has been testified by yourself, Minister, and by my colleagues before me, on individuals, on families, and on the exchequer and society at large. It can no longer be justified in terms of the revenue the alcohol industry generates in and for Ireland, or how our pub and crack culture attracts tourism. I grew up on a definition of the idea of crack culture was about music, it was about friendship, it was great fun. But we seem to have redefined what it means, and I think it's something that we have to seriously answer. We know that alcohol has been identified as a contributory factor in 97% of public order offences, and according to international research, there's a link between increased alcohol consumption and increased levels of public order crime. We know that alcohol-related crime is costing us £1.2 billion this year. Now, I think all of us here could make a long list of what we would like to spend that £1.2 billion, and that's only in relation to crime and not the health costs. I have had the honour to write 2 European reports as a rapporteur for the Economic and Social Committee on the harmful effects of alcohol. And very often, the employers' organisations would roll in on the side of the drinks industry. But luckily I was able to persuade many of my colleagues from the employers' organisations to support me in my work, because when you look at the figures, for example, of increased absenteeism, it costs Ireland £1.5 billion a year, according to a recent survey by IBEC, the very organisation that is supporting the drinks manufacturing industry of Ireland. I think employers need to wake up to the cost that alcohol is having. We also see that it's the primary reason for 4% of short-term absence from work by male employees and 1% by female employees. We also know in relation to health that every 7 hours someone in Ireland dies from an alcohol-related disease, and alcohol is a factor in up to 1/3 of all deaths of unnatural causes. So I think the figures are quite startling. And Minister, you mentioned also about the indirect effects on children. We know that in Ireland, between 61,000 and 104,000 children aged under 15 in Ireland were estimated to be living with parents who misuse alcohol. and that 1 in 11 children are impacted negatively by their parental alcohol problems, and 1 in every 6 cases of child abuse is attributed to alcohol. So we really do have to wake up, and I'm glad ministers say that you'll bring back the proposals as soon as possible, but we really do need a greater urgency. And the 5 conclusion points I'd like to raise and ask is, firstly, you mentioned about the National Substance Misuse Strategy, and I suppose, Minister, I'd like to draw your attention also to the Joint Committee report which Senator Burke mentioned, which was done by the Health and Children Committee on the report on the misuse of alcohol and other drugs. We came up with 13 recommendations. They were debated heavily at the committee, but it was one of those committee meetings I felt was one of those good days in the House. We had all members on the same side. We were trying to work out what was the best recommendations. So there is cross-party consensus on those recommendations. So I'd bring that to your attention. It was published in January. Secondly, Minister, you mentioned, there's been significant delays with regard to both the publication of the Alcohol Action Plan and the sale of alcohol bill. They were expected in September and before the end of 2012. So can you clarify, when will it be published? Thirdly, Minister, the Minister for Justice and Equality, Alan Shatter, TD, was due to bring the recommendations of the RRAI Voluntary Code of Conduct, but he was also supposed to come back prior to the summer recess on Section 9 of the Intoxicating Liquor Act 2008, which you mentioned yourself, which deals with the structural separation of alcohol from other products. So we have the legislation there in place. It's a bizarre piece of legislation because the Minister actually has a choice when he comes to implement it. I've never seen legislation that actually gives the Minister the choice. We should have decided when we were putting it into legislation, and I think you'll find it interesting. I had to reread the legislation several times, but I raised it here in the House with the Minister for Justice under an adjournment matter. But it's something that could be put into place now. We all talk about the prevalence of alcohol products strewing into other parts of the supermarket. We have legislation there that we can put into place. Fourthly, given the legal challenge being put to the Scottish Government against minimum pricing, can the Minister clarify what changes with regard to alcohol pricing will be introduced in Ireland? And if minimum pricing cannot be introduced, will consideration be given to introducing a ban on below-cost selling? And finally, Minister, there's been a significant amount of work being undertaken in Northern Ireland with regard to alcohol advertising and price promotion. So by the end of 2012, Northern Ireland will introduce additional regulations to ban certain irresponsible drink promotions that encourage excessive drinking and specified pricing practices. Further restrictions have also been proposed in Northern Ireland and are included in Scotland's licensing law, which are intended to prevent supermarkets and off-sale premises advertising school offers anywhere other than within a licensed area of their premises. The restrictions would also apply to other advertising materials such as newspapers, in-store magazines and leaflets. So I'm asking the Minister, will you give consideration to introduce similar measures? It's my understanding that the legislation currently exists in the form of Section 16 of the Intoxicating Liquor Act 2008, so these changes could be brought forward pretty quickly. Thank you.
Well timed, Senator. 1 second to spare. Next speaker is Senator Gilroy. You have 8 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Herlock, and very welcome to the Chamber Minister. I think I will start by welcoming